Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Impact Hub Berlin. I have the honor tonight, my name is Maya, to welcome you here. I'm part of the Impact Hub Berlin team, heading the innovation team here. And as the Impact Hub Berlin, I won't tell you a lot, but for the ones who haven't been here, we're a proud member of a global network of Impact Hubs worldwide, where we try to bring social innovation and entrepreneurship for sustainability, for the SDGs together to work on a future that works for all. And we really want to be an open community, so we have a space, a creative space. We want to enable communities, we want to enable exchange between also unlikely allies, how we call them, people you wouldn't think before, that could actually work together for something better. And I think the future that works for all will include technologies. So I'm very happy actually that we have this great and amazing, also maybe critical, but at least reflection about the new emerging technology everybody's talking about that is the future. We also have this idea of technology, tech for good, startups for good. That's a nice idea, but I think it's also very inspiring to have a diverse panel here talking about what about the ethics, how is the technology actually serving the greater good, is it technology that serves humanity, so I'm very, very excited. And we are in general really like to collaborate, having different communities, and our co-founder Anna is actually part of this very, very inspiring journal as the associated editor and trying to bring also startup perspectives into the whole discussion. So she will also be here and be later around, and I'm really amazed that so many people are here on a Friday evening listening to this thing. And welcome, have a good evening, have a great discussion. We are, maybe also one more thing, I'm very happy also as a community. We have on the panel also one of our tribe leaders, which is a community engagement we do where people can use our rooms to bring people together that want to discuss a certain topic and trying to be and create a community and bringing the world forward. So happy also to have you here on the panel as one of our tribe. You will be introducing yourself, and welcome, have a great evening. Thank you very much, and I'll give it to the Delphi people.
Many thanks, Maya, for your introduction, the first introduction. Now the second one's coming up. And yes, so who am I? I'm Wolfgang Andrea. I founded a startup in the year of 2000. It's at the end of the bubble. We got some money and we founded a database which developed slowly but surely into a publisher. And so we are actually more a traditional publisher, and been around now practically for 20 years. And it developed, so we have journals, traditional journals like European Data Protection Law, very traditional. And so it was really exciting when Clara turned up from the Axion team a couple of years ago and said, oh, I want to do something new. And this new is what we're seeing tonight in this audience, in this atmosphere here. I would like to have offices like this here, just to be sure we're rather conventional still, where we are now. And in this new atmosphere, and very thankful that we can do this together, that all of you came here tonight. Now, what is Delphi? What is our goal? Our goal is to really get into these emerging topics, seeing what's going on, and having an interaction between the different disciplines. And this is really a crucial thing, and if we see the whole development in the world, and I'm very thankful that we're here tonight, being with the impact people, which have the sustainability as their main cause. Now, we are very happy too that we got in touch. We found that Shano took over as editor. Shano is with the University of Twente and with the University of Delft. He's a philosopher and a technical, and so he has the two in himself, and because this is really this interdisciplinary thing, which is so important. I'm so thankful that Shannon took over last year, and he'll share this evening, and I'm very happy to pass on to him. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Wolfgang. Welcome. I'm very, very glad that you're here and not somewhere else. And which is quite amazing because we are in Berlin. It's a Friday night, and you choose to be here and not go to one of those other amazing locations that Berlin has to offer. So this must be kind of special. And I think it is. And we try to also illustrate why it is special. So what are we talking about? What are we talking about? We are talking about a lot of different things. We are talking about pacemakers, brain imaging technologies, cochlear implants, retinal chips, deep brain stimulation, Google Glass, smart bracelets, smart mirrors, smart pills, smart skin. I guess our skin is stupid. Mood enhancers, teledildonics. Teledildonics, actually I have one of my staff members who works on teledildonics. Nanopills, machine learning, algorithms, artificial intelligence, artificial super intelligence, always super, Internet of Things, augmented reality, ambient technologies, persuasive technologies, surgeon robots, robot judges, genetic engineering, synthetic biology, and the list goes on and on and on. And these technologies are increasingly influencing our world and intruding in the very fabric of our bodies and minds. They are becoming kind of intimate. They are becoming intimate technologies that are not only influencing our thinking and actions, but also our wishes and desires. I mean, they're really getting inside. Technologies that are deeply, deeply shaping our lives. Technologies that demand our attention, that demand to be taken care of. Just like your iPhone demands to be taken care of, demands to be nourished. Some people think that in 20, 30 years, these technologies will not only create kind of a radically different world, but eventually also will bring about a completely different human, a post-human maybe, kind of a cyborg, something different. So this is what we are talking about. And Wolfgang already mentioned Delphi. So with the publishing house Lexion, we have launched this journal, Delphi. And with this journal, we try to kind of provide a platform for a kind of triangle for academics, for industry, and for government. And the idea is to radically reflect on current technological developments and exchange kind of big picture views on emerging technology, because we are a bit lost. I mean, on the one hand, we all kind of sense that these technologies we cannot completely control them. At the same time, we don't want to kind of accept that we cannot do anything. So we attempt to regulate. We try to find ways to, in one way or another, not be completely in control, but have some kind of influence. The question is how to do that. And I think we can only do that from a more interdisciplinary perspective. So before we start, I'm curious, what is your background? Please raise your hand. Who is from industry? Who is from government? In one way or another, law, politics. And who is from academia, so university? And who is, it's complicated. Okay. So a bit about the setup. So the meeting will have two parts. So the first part will consist of a panel discussion. I'll enable the panelists to introduce themselves in a minute. The second part will be less organized, so we will be able to improvise more, and there will be also enough room for Q&A, so you can become part of the discussion. If you already want to actively participate in the first part, you can submit questions through a medium called Slido. And you need to go to be able to do that to a website, type in www.slido.do, so you find it there, and then also type in a hashtag ethics.tech, and then you can submit questions. And if these questions are good questions, then we'll consider responding to them. So let's start. So we are talking about emerging technologies, and these responses to emerging technologies range from kind of extreme optimism to very negative dystopian scenarios. Some people think they are great, other people think no. Some believe that there could be a solution for every possible problem. Other people believe that emerging technology will be the cause of problems beyond our imagination. So the field is the range is quite broad. So let me enable the panelists to introduce themselves briefly. And I want to ask you, or to introduce yourself, but also to indicate where do you position yourself. So are you a tech optimist? Are you a tech pessimist? A tech liberalist? Tech conservative? A tech agnostic? Or it's complicated? So can I start with you, Jan? Of course.
Hi, my name is Jan. I work at the law firm Taylor Wessing in Berlin. I work in the area of technology, telecommunication, and media. I advise on data protection and IT law. And as a lawyer, of course, I'm deeply pessimistic. I'm worried and I'm skeptical about AI. No, actually, I'm just kidding. That is a cliche, I hope. I'm very optimistic about a few things. For example, I'm very passionate about autonomous driving. That's one area I'm very interested in, and I think there are a lot of chances for a better environment, for saving lives and stuff like that. But of course, with AI, there are also very huge topics we have to tackle, and one big issue from a legal perspective is always transparency. We have to ensure from a legal perspective that AI is transparent and that you can review decisions, for example, that AI makes. So that's a quick summary.
Thank you. Anna.
Hi, I'm Annabelle. I'm a serial founder, a social impact founder, and running the International Institute for Sustainability Management. I'm a professorship also for e-commerce and communication management, and I'm the head of Better Wings. Better Wings is educating digital competences in schools, universities, but also in companies. And if I have to put myself into a category, then I would be a tech optimist. But you can't say this is in general. I think I have to go more into detail, and I think I can do this later on.
Thank you. Vince.
So, hi. First, I'm very happy that we have such a packed house. I'm Vince. I'm an MD PhD. I'm a medical AI researcher working at Charité. We develop AI solutions for stroke, for the prevention and for the treatment of stroke. I also hold an MA in medical ethics, so I'm also specialized on the ethics of AI. And I would say I'm a tech realist. Tech is here, it's not going to go away. We have to deal with it, and we have to leverage the good parts and try to contain the bad parts.
Hard one to follow. My name is Nicholas. I am an economist. I come originally from Brazil, Rio de Janeiro to be exact. Been here in Germany for 7 years now. I am one of the co-founders of the Good Technology Collective, which is a think tank based here in Berlin to explore the social impact of technologies, especially emerging technologies like AI, IoT, and on the medical field, basically mostly on the AI side. We try also to give a voice for people that have very interesting thoughts about technology and helping them get the message out there. I myself, I am a tech optimist, but I really distrust people. So that's so you have to sprinkle that on top of my optimism. So if I can explain that in one short sentence, is basically that hunger didn't end the day that we could provide enough food to feed us all. So I'm very positive about the impact of technology. I feel that technology is one, if not the main driver of socioeconomic growth throughout our history. But just because we find out how to solve a problem doesn't mean that people will. So that's my point.
Hey, my name is Chloe. So I used to be some kind of startup business, also co-creating an initiative which is called Deep Circle, aiming at taking responsibility in Europe for emerging technologies. But since last week, I'm a researcher assistant at ESCP Europe, and on the side of that, doing a PhD, exploring what could be the impact of blockchain technology in entrepreneurship. And concerning the question, so basically I'm a tech optimist because I live in Europe, and because tonight we're having a discussion on emerging technologies and ethics, and we have a fully packed house and people interested within this topic. But then, I mean, if we have to take it like from a more global perspective, then I wouldn't be such a tech optimist if I was living in another part of the world, for example, China or other country where there is not such a consciousness about ethics and what we should do with tech.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Wolfgang already introduced me. So my name is Jan Leiding. I'm a professor of philosophy. And I have a background in chemistry, behavioral science, and philosophy. I'm head of the Department of Philosophy at the University of Twente and vice dean of the faculty. And I would consider myself also, I think, a tech realist. I mean, that's a good one. So, yeah, being realist and critical at the same time, but certainly not a pessimist. I think tech has a lot to offer, but we have to also find kind of the good insights and a good way to in one way or another, to use it, to be part of it. So before I'm going to sit, just to explain to you how the first part is organized. So in order to structure the conversation and prevent the discussion addressing everything and therefore nothing, I would like to limit ourselves to 3 technological fields that are radically impacted by emerging tech. So 3 technological fields that in one way or another are radically impacted by emerging tech, and then also reserve some time for deeper reflection. So 4 slots, more or less 15 minutes slot. And the first slot will consider the impact of emerging technology on the medical field and on health in general. And then I, in particular, would like to focus on machine learning, artificial intelligence, and big data. The second part will cover the impact of emerging tech on the field of law. And the third part will tackle the impact of emerging tech on smart industry. And there I would especially would like to focus on blockchain technology. And the last part, deeper reflecting on the question whether we still can control technology, or whether technology is already controlling us, and maybe we don't know it yet, and we're already part of the machine. So I'm going to sit now, so we will start with the first slide, so the impact of emerging tech on the medical field and health in general. Let me just in 3 sentences try to kind of introduce, and then I'll give the word to the panel. So emerging tech is transforming the medical field and our approach, and it's transforming in different ways to health. And maybe health more radically than all other fields. Some, I mean, again, you see here a lot of different kind of responses to the impact of tech on this field. Some express the fear that robots or machine learning or artificial intelligence will replace the good old doctor. Others believe that big data will help us to kind of eradicate all illnesses, so it will solve all our problems, so cancer, AIDS will all history. We also have wearables like Fitbit, smart mirrors, and the question there is, are they really kind of helping us to live a healthier life? Or are they making us just obsessed with our health, creating problems that were not there? So, and I would like actually to come back to this issue, because maybe tech is not only solving problems, but also creating problems that then promises to solve. So, which might be also an interesting angle to take. So, let me go to our panel after having introduced this first part. And I would like to ask Vince and Annabelle first, because this is a bit your field of research also. And I want to kind of structure the discussion by actually repeating two questions again and again. What would be, and the first question is, what would be the biggest problem that this emerging tech could solve in this field? So the biggest problem, so what would be that in health and in the medical field? And yeah, which emerging technology and in what way could solve this problem? Can you just kind of respond to that, and then of course the floor is open also for other panelists. Can I start with you?
Yes, of course, yeah. First of all, what I completely forgot in my introduction is that I'm very happy and thankful to hold now the tribe of Digitalization Health at Impact Hub. I really look forward to cooperate with Impact Hub on very interesting health and digitalization events for the future. I'm very long in the health sector, and not only in the mental part but also in the physical part, and I think for both there are a lot of challenges awaiting, and there are a lot of problem solving awaiting, and facing some branches in the health. In each you find some problem solving. So, for example, in the prosthetic sector, looking at, for example, Ottobock was some years ago just a company preparing prosthetics for handicapped people. And nowadays it's so huge worldwide in this sector, growing especially in the area of artificial intelligence. So there, I think with people with handicaps, it's really a huge problem solving, having the ability to use this emerging tech with artificial intelligence in addition. But there are other fields, of course, talking, for example, crisis situation, special situation, talking about, for example, if there's a huge accident and you want to get somebody out of this accident, machines can help very much, because a human has emotions, empathy, and in situation where quick acting is necessary, sometimes this can hinder from quick action, just do something. So there I think it's problem solving, just to give two samples of a lot of samples I could give you. On the other hand, of course, there are harms which can be named in the area of medication and health. For example, a few days ago I looked something up about how what solutions do we have already for improving the ability to see things with artificial intelligence. And typing this in German in Google, I found just negative implications, none positive in the German field. It was just about, okay, the eyes get worse because of working too much with screens, or the eyes get bad because looking at or working facing machines is always not good. It's much better to put your eyes in watching something in the nature, green than gray. So there was nothing positive about it, and of course it's true. Sitting in front of the computer is not really the best position for a human for your health. And of course, we talk about sex texting, cyberbullying, and other topics that can really influence a person mentally. And being isolated, more and more isolated in jobs where digitization is ahead of, like coding, for example, that can make you really, that can really turn into something, mental diseases, depression or something like this. Facing the numbers here in Germany, we have an strong increase in depression over the last 10 years, and it's increasing, especially for the younger ones. And the problem is the people don't feel it and they don't see it because they're used to it and think it's so easy and it's so funny, and therefore they don't see where's maybe the limit for that something is making them sick.
thank you. So you see a lot of kind of opportunities in the mental health bins. You have a background in medicine. Can you respond to the same question? So what would be kind of the biggest, harshest problem that emerging tech would solve in this field?
Yeah, I really like the question, because we all read about all these different applications and all the possibilities that might emerge, and then you force me to think about one thing. I like to find an abstract, basically to summarize it more abstractly. I think especially let's say in the next 10 years, the reduction of mistakes in the clinical setting is probably the biggest application that we can find. You started by, will AI replace the good old doctor? Some people probably would be even happy about it, they don't like that doctor, but I think this is something for the future. This is complex AI. AI has cool things we can do with it. It's still in its infancy. It's actually all in all relatively simple technique. And so in contrast to this complex AI that will emerge, we use right now AI tools. So tools that help the doctor in the clinical setting to do their work better. And basically there are two types here. Where can mistakes be avoided? There are basically two types of AI that can be used in a clinical setting. One working on structured data, so on imaging, on really like lab values. And here the doctors could be freed of repetitive, boring and annoying stuff. So an example for it would be images. Pathologists, radiologists, they sit there, they look at their images day in and day out all the time. Actually having systems that could do this work for them, could free them to do other, maybe even more important stuff. Postmortems, for example, are almost not done anymore by pathologists, although they are important. Next to structured data, there is unstructured data. So here NLP, natural language processing, would be the important thing that could help. And again, just one example that could help doctors to choose the best care for their patients. No doctor nowadays can follow the literature. Literature is ever growing. I think there was even a couple of years ago already a paper showing that if a doctor would want to stay up to date in their field, they have to read papers the whole day. That just doesn't work. So here, NLP-based, again, just one example, could help to collect data from all the papers and come up with, this is the state of the art to avoid mistakes.
Thank you. I mean, if I go to the other panelists, you seem to kind of presuppose that we still would want the good old doctor. We need it in one way or another. But another take, a more radical take, is actually that the doctor becomes more and more a problem, because you mentioned imaging technology, and of course these images need to be interpreted in one way or another. These interpretations are very standardized, so you need a lot of literature and background to read them and interpret them correctly, and maybe a machine would be able to do that better. So the human becomes more and more kind of the weak link, the problem. Why not just get rid of them? Maybe Chloe?
So here is the thing, technology is able to give us a lot of input, a lot of insight, but then like basically you wouldn't be able to replace the human as from a human interaction perspective. Because basically when you go to see the doctor, you're also like looking for some kind of emotion, for some kind of empathy that basically technology is not able to bring to you. So I think that basically the human and the doctor will be always and still the interface in between what can tech brings in and what can the doctor gives out to the patient.
Just, of course, I will play a bit advocate of the devil today. So maybe most people wouldn't need empathy. I mean, they would need just expertise. I mean, give me expertise, and I mean, my mother or my wife will give the empathy. I mean, that could be a response to the doctor. So why is that so important? Maybe Adam?
Yes, I can answer, because I was running a startup some years ago. It was about just mental illnesses, and it was a high degree, an increase of that. And most of the people just called us because they wanted to talk to us. They wanted to talk about how they feel, what happened, and they said that often the doctor has no time to listen to that. And seeing the statistics about mental illnesses or psychosomatic illnesses or the illnesses which just need a doctor who can fix a broken knee, for example, we have an increasing of the psychosomatic illnesses. Psychosomatic illnesses doesn't mean that for the first few you know that this is a psychosomatic illness. Often it looks like that it's just somatic. So for example, having something, having the back injury. No? So often you think just because of you're sitting not in the right way, so you're sitting like this in front of the computer also, but not in that way as you should sit in front of the computer. So you think, oh, it's just because the back is aching because of my sitting position. But often there's something behind it. There's something behind it with mentally. So it's stress, for example, or being struggling for burnout or something like this. Of course, I mean, in the end, if artificial intelligence can be really learn and being so good that you can write in, okay, I have a lot of stress at home, okay, my wife doesn't like me currently, or whatever. And then, and then maybe the machine can tell you the same. But I think there's a difference, and the difference is the mistakes. The difference is, as you said, the empathy. And I think machines won't be as good as people in these, what is empathy, emotions, what makes a difference. Because the machines are currently more like having the O and the 1 as the possibilities.
Okay, Nicholas, maybe we would be able to kind of create empathetic machines, and one of the advantages of machines is that they don't have a bad day. I mean, the doctor can have a bad day and be not empathetic at all. So what would be your take?
All right, so let's first bring it back to today where there's no empathic machines, and then we jump there. About substituting the good old doctor, the truth is sometimes you need to, and I'm not even talking about in the future where we have a machine that can actually provide good diagnosis for a host of diseases. But for example, and I really recommend to check this out, we are in the GTC, we're very good friends of the people at AI Scope. And AI Scope basically uses computer vision machine learning to identify malaria in blood cells, especially focus on people in third world countries and even there in hard to reach places. And the truth of the matter is, after you get to a certain level of poverty, capitalism doesn't work that well anymore. And I say this as a pretty liberal economist, but honestly, by the numbers, companies just don't invest enough there because they don't think that those people can pay for the life-saving medication. And even when they do, they're much more worried about investing in something that would be very PR related. So in the case of malaria, you can get drugs for malaria for almost no cost in most of those countries because Bayer and Pfizer, they offer them free of cost. But nobody cared about how to diagnose the problem correctly. So right now what you have is that people in the villages, they need to take 2 days off to go to the hospital to check if they have malaria, and they most of the times think like it's just a fever, why would I spend 4 days away from the field when I shouldn't? So how do you break that economic impossibility where you don't have enough money to pay doctors to go there, and if you're giving them money as a donation, it's very hard. So you need to kind of reduce the amount of people in between. And this basically the software allows for people with a camera and a very cheap microphone to do the same thing as a doctor would. But most important is not about after the diagnosis giving somebody the medication directly, but actually sending them to the doctor. So before we substitute the good old doctor, maybe we have to substitute a lot of people in the way between people and the doctors. And when we're talking about empathetic machines, I'm actually more on the side of Annabelle. I think even the day that we are pretty sure that we created somebody that can be empathetic with, there are certain kinds of news that you would rather get it from a human, like getting the notice that you have cancer or that you have to go through a very tough surgery. And if there's the uncanny valley as well, the idea that if we get a machine that is very close to human but not there, people will be very, very creeped out about it, that an almost human tells you need surgery now, or life expectancy, 2 months. It would be terrible. It would be very, very bad.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, maybe the uncanny valley is just a matter of time, so you should just get used to these machines or human-like machines. Is that not just kind of a matter of time, Jan?
I completely agree with Annabelle, Chloe, and Nicholas about the empathy part. I need empathy from my doctor, from my personal view, and as a lawyer, it's the same thing. Sometimes a client calls and he wants my expertise, of course, but he also wants to talk about the problem. So that's also an important part in the legal area as well. One interesting thing about what Lynn said, you have the technical insight into that, but if we have an AI that can help diagnose diseases, for example, we can maybe save resources and have a solution for the problem that we don't have enough doctors, for example, in Germany at the moment. So maybe an AI that is smart enough to support a doctor and then save the resources for the personal contact, for empathy, for more time, create more time for doctors that can be empathetic. That would be a great thing. One thing that could be a problem is, but maybe you can talk more about, Vince, how you see that, is the phase when a doctor has an AI that is not that smart and he maybe blindly relies on that because he thinks the AI will solve the problem and he doesn't reflect, or maybe he doesn't have the knowledge to reflect on that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, maybe two things. So the one thing, I think the first doctor that will be replaced by AI is the doctor that doesn't exist. So we will have AI systems in places where there are no doctors now, in rural areas where there are no doctors anymore, maybe in developing countries where they've never been there, like smart point-of-catch systems that can do certain things themselves, do a triage, and then decide, okay, here we can maybe give out a package of antibiotics, or that person should go to a doctor. So this is another of the points where it actually saves resources on the long run. And sorry, your second question?
The second question was about the phase when a doctor relies on an AI that is not that smart.
Exactly. So this goes, in my opinion, actually really in the whole big section of how can we trust the AI tools, and this is one of my favorite topics, which is biased AI. Where, so especially this point that it's kind of a black box and the tools will be there and you just press a button and you get a result. That's kind of very problematic if you have to 100% be able to trust the underlying algorithm to do what it's supposed to do. Otherwise we get a big problem. And biased here really means that the data that was used to create this algorithm has a flaw, which can be everything. So your algorithm is, for example, and this is a problem that we will face in the next 10 years, most studies, this was known for a long time, most studies are biased. The study person is a white male. That's the normal study person. So if we use this data to create personalized prediction, it will be wrong for everybody else.
Actually, we already kind of moved to the second question that I wanted to address, namely, what would be the biggest harm that this emerging tech could cause in this field? I mean, you already mentioned bias, AI. Let's be a bit more kind of explicit. Other people who want to kind of tackle this. So what would be the biggest harm? If the first thing that comes to your mind. So we shouldn't really go there. What would that be? Maybe.
Do you mean the biggest harm of AI for medicine, for us?
Yes, AI could be an example. You could also take another technology, but one of these kind of emerging technologies, how could they harm the medical field?
Okay, so for me, like one major harm that could come would be like with gene editing technologies, so CRISPR, especially because basically it opens the door to every kind of possibility, such as like personalized self-identity if you reproduce the gene of someone, or like basically like giving out genes that are like bad intention, or like that are like kind of bad genes somehow. So this is for me what I can see as the biggest harm to health to date.
Before we move to the next topic, maybe just to stay a bit longer on CRISPR-Cas, because you mentioned it. Maybe somebody else who would like to respond to that? I mean, Jennifer Doudna, of course, one of the developers of CRISPR-Cas, and I think this never happened before. Even even she indicated, okay, maybe we should pause here. I mean, this is so big, maybe we should consider the kind of ethical implications before we go on. I mean, I never came across a scientist who developed something and then said, maybe we should stop. But in this case, of course, we see, I mean, you know, the China case, that people don't want to stop. So is this really the biggest harm, or maybe we are just exaggerating and we should relativize it a bit? What is your take?
I wanted to respond to Chloe, and I think it's the same, yes. I think the biggest harm could be if AI decides even more or less about our lives, what lives has a value. So what we are discussing currently in mobility case, for example, if a car has on one hand one person, one older person, on the other hand one younger person, and one has to die because of the car has to go in one or the other direction. If we are talking about artificial intelligence, and artificial intelligence in the end decides about human lives, I think this will be can be a huge harm, because then we saw already in the case of military, for example, if people are stepping back and don't have the gun in their hand, but having just a button to press, that they don't feel as responsible as doing the direct action. So about this, if artificial intelligence stands in between or just replaces us, then I think the biggest harm could be that we don't feel responsible anymore for ourselves.
I mean, it is interesting to mention, and everybody of course mentions the trolley problem, so well, should we go for the old person or the young person or two people? Actually, I once asked this same question to designers, and their response was, this is just a design mistake. I mean, you shouldn't enable kind of, you shouldn't design machines that have to make that choice. So this is just a prejudice in a certain sense from our part. We could fix it in other ways. Maybe just the last one, because you're nodding, Nicholas.
Yeah, because when you're talking ethics in tech, the trolley problem comes very often, and I talk to a lot of people about it as well. But in the end, for me, it's about the rules of the road, right? The rules should be put into place before the situation happens. That is how laws normally work. So in the case of the car, probably it would be at any cost save the life of the driver. The car has a social obligation with the person that bought it, not with society in general. Let's just give it from there. So basically, the moment that the car is produced, he should know how to react. Something came in the middle of the road, swerved to outside of the road, for example. They shouldn't go into the machine to make a value, judgment if old life is better than young life, or 5 or 4. The most important thing is when we buy the car, there's a transparency about which rules we would follow in case of this. And I think law setting in this case is much better, even if that case is, and that's a very complicated statement to do, right? Even if that causes more deaths, I would prefer to have something that is transparent.
Yeah, maybe just also to consider, yes, please?
Just a last thought, because you said the AI should not decide in the case of the driving car. The AI cannot decide. It cannot be trained. There is no data on which it can be trained. In that case, you should drive, kill the granny. So this is something that we need to decide, and it's very interesting, and this relates to most of these topics, that suddenly that all these AI systems lead to effects that suddenly relate to all of us individually. Suddenly people start thinking about ethics. The trolley problem was a problem of philosophers since decades. They thought about it. Most people didn't even know it. Now suddenly everybody, I'm exaggerating a bit, is talking about the trolley problem due to autonomous driving, and now because suddenly they have to make a decision there. And this relates to many other aspects too. Like I said, the studies, everybody knew that there were problems, and as long as it was just a group, everybody was shrugging. Now you're afraid that, oh wait, this could kill me. Now I really like that we are approaching now basically a phase where a lot more people start thinking about ethical problems.
Thank you. I mean, maybe also what we should take into consideration, I mean, we delegate decisions to technologies all the time. I mean, take this good old safety belt. I mean, if you don't use it, it will make this annoying noise until you use it. So, and there are a lot of other kind of examples that we can mention. I mean, at the same time, of course, the question is where to draw the line. I mean, how far can we go? And of course, the question is also, who is it who makes the decisions? I mean, we say we have to make the decisions, but what seems to become increasingly unclear is who that we is. And especially if artificial intelligence is being developed in a pace that is developed now, it becomes more and more a black box. And it's not only programming, but the programming that we do is also programming itself to a certain extent. So maybe just to take that into account, I want to go to the second part of the discussion, which will focus on the field of law. So artificial intelligence and the Internet of Things are greatly influencing information and know-how protection in the field of law. And Jan, that's your field of expertise. What do you think are the most important effects of these developments on let's say, ordinary people, civilians? Can you clarify a bit what we were talking about?
Two different things on that. My first point is that I'm a little bit disappointed in AI at the moment in the legal area. When you talk about legal tech, a lot of the big law firms invest into legal tech at the moment and in AI, and the software that I'm seeing is not helping me that much actually. Right now, it's in this state. It's more about the very repetitive tasks that can be done by AI at the moment. This makes some of my work obsolete, but it doesn't change my job that much. When you talk about, I think you don't want to talk only about legal tech, do you? The question is more about AI in general and the problems in the legal area.
Not that general. I mean, that's of course legal, politics, government, but try to kind of remain in that area, otherwise it will get too broad.
Yeah, one of the biggest problems I talked about in my introduction would be automated decision making. That's also regulated in the GDPR, and transparency in that context. The GDPR, for example, obliges companies to have provide information on the logic, for example, of the automated decision making, so that I can understand as a data subject what's happening and maybe oppose the decision. And that's one part that is very problematic in that field, actually.
One of you? Maybe, sorry. Yeah, maybe indicating first, again, kind of starting with the same question. What would be, let's start optimistic. I mean, we tend to start on the other side, but what would be kind of the biggest problem that this emerging tech, could be artificial intelligence or different other tech, could solve in this area? What do you think? Yeah?
In the era of law, you read about this lawyers, this will lose their job because there will be sooner or later a data which collects all the cases which have been there worldwide, collecting them, and if you need to find something, you don't need to check just the 1,000 pages of some cases. You have it straight ahead. So this is a theory. If this theory comes true, of course, it doesn't take so much time to solve a case, but of course, but it's something you mentioned already a little bit. I mean, it needs the humans which go a little bit deeper into the case, ask a bit further about this, but it can be a start, makes it easier, and solve a few cases which are more easy to solve. So they are on a daily basis. It can be an easier access for people who don't have so much money or doesn't want to spend so much money on taking a lawyer, of course, which is nowadays already starting to be in the field.
Maybe Chloe, do you see kind of big opportunities here for emerging technologies in this field?
So basically, I was thinking that one useful thing could be an AI that would be able to, according to your problem or to your company idea, find you the most friendly legal framework somewhere over the world and make it compliant with it. Such tools basically that I can think them going and think them could be useful.
Maybe, yes,
Could I bring to that? Yeah, that sounds very good for big companies actually. So when I go to that country where I save taxes, for example, so that could have a positive effect, but it could also have a very big negative effect in that specific area. But I completely agree with Annabelle. The main issue for AI in the legal field is that a lot of regulation is very vague and abstract, and you have to interpret the legislation. AI can help you with that, but you usually have to weigh interests, and that's hard for AI at the moment.
You want to respond to this one?
No, actually, just going back to the original question of which
Maybe before we go there, because I see a very urgent question here. Can we please talk about the real issue, structural racism and sexism, perpetuated through tools, different tools? That's really a problematic topic. So I just try to kind of relate to the discussion to this question. So we tried also to kind of use law to tackle these kind of issues of racism, sexism. Maybe emerging tech would help us to do that better. What would be your take, also including a bit the question from the audience? Are we able to do that?
I mean, maybe I can just quickly answer that question, because it was actually something that I wanted to touch upon again. This is again a problem of bias that I mentioned before. I actually don't think that this can be used to solve it. We really have to be careful that we do not make it worse, because if we use, so I'm not sure if there have been attempts to build systems, so if we're in the law field, to predict if somebody is guilty. These systems were incredibly racist. So this happened. Just last year, Amazon stopped a tool which they wanted to use to hire people, to decide who would be a good choice to hire, and they used their own data, which of course was totally sexist because they were hiring only males before, so that's what the AI learned. So I don't know who asked it, but this is really one of the most important things that I also mentioned before. We have to make sure that these systems are not biased.
I try still to remain optimistic. So we trying to kind of highlight the opportunities that this emerging tech offer. Nicholas, maybe?
Oh, damn. I really wanted to say something bad. All right.
You'll get the chance.
But on the good side, for example, I come from a developing country, right? And sometimes we forget that access to decent legal counsel is not a universal right. And in countries like Brazil, but many others, the 1% can basically just keep prolonging judgments as a way to never be arrested, even if they're guilty. And that's a very common case in Brazil. You just keep appealing until you hit the 10-year mark, and then you cannot prosecute a crime that is more than 10 years old. So actually anything on that side that would speed up judgments, or by making it easier for a judge to go through enormous amounts of paperwork, or by automatizing a lot that today is done by clerks and people, anything that could make this more straightforward would turn up in those countries into better legal systems. And the other side, for the people that don't have access to decent lawyers and have to depend on public defenders and might have very, very little time to do this. I think in America there was a case saying that public defendants have around 8 to 12 minutes per client in certain states. So any kind of tool that you can give those to understand the topics better in the least amount of time possible, it would help. I'm not saying it would solve all the problems. I'm not saying that people wouldn't find new ways to go back to the old problems, but it would help the problems of today.
Maybe just to take, again, another angle and remain optimistic. I mean, in the Netherlands, they're experimenting with kind of robot judges. So trying to kind of delegate not that complicated cases to machines, because often it is not that fun to kind of take care of these cases, and these machines seems to be quite reliable, more reliable than the general judge. Would that be kind of an option? Should we just get rid of, let's say, 60-70% of the judges, replace them with trustworthy machines, and then the remaining 30% can focus on the more complicated issues? Yeah?
Yes, I think Nicolas said it, and you said it as well. Saving resources, for example, in that instance, for more complicated cases, could be good, but we will come back to the bias discussion. Yes, AI can produce, theoretically, if the database is good, more objective, quicker decisions. But it's hard to have a database that is not biased and have an INI that is not biased. And you would have to have a process where you can object to the decision and where a human judge looks at the decision and understands the algorithm and can check it, because otherwise you wouldn't have any chance to really oppose the decision. So,
but if we maximally invest in these databases and try to increase and enlarge them as much as possible, and trying to kind of get rid of the biases, I mean, my question is it a practical problem, or is there also a fundamental problem there? I mean, is it a practical problem in the sense that we can solve it, just a matter of time, we need better databases, or is there something that we cannot just practically solve, that we kind of to resist our solutions? What do you think? Chloe, maybe?
So what I was thinking is that 1 month ago I read a book written in 56 about artificial intelligence, and that was kind of promising the upcoming of artificial general intelligence and also artificial super intelligence and all of these things. And that were basically saying well, in a couple of years, within the 10 years, we will have some super efficient AI-based tool. But at the end of the day, what we can see now is that 2019, we're still speaking about how to make our databases not biased and how to make them more objective and more neutral, so that they can take neutral decisions. So I think this is an ongoing issue that will just continue over the time, and it's actually pretty difficult to make a database not biased, because at the end of the day, a human will do this job, and every human is actually biased to some extent.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether there is a proper system to basically make sure that there is no bias, but it's actually a discussion that is going for 50 years now.
Yeah, but just to continue on this, I mean, we seem to kind of expect more from machines than we're expecting from people. So people are very biased, and then we create machines which are not perfect, and then we say, okay, we have to get rid of the machines because they are not perfect enough, but the humans could be worse. So don't we expect too much from our machines, and shouldn't we be a bit more kinder?
I mean, then there's still the kind of blockchain solution, which would mean taking decentralized consensus rather than base our judgment and consensus on only one person. But yeah, basically blockchain could be a solution to that, in the sense that we could basically build and base these decisions on more decentralized communities and decentralized consensus, which at the end of the day, if everyone in this decentralized network is somehow aligned to the same objective, they shouldn't be biased at the end of the day. But it's a real hassle and a lot of workload somehow.
Okay, Jan, you have the last word on this topic, and then we go to industry.
I have nothing to say actually. I agree completely with Chloe. So, yeah.
No, sorry, I thought you wanted to.
Oh, no, that's
okay. Okay, let's go to the third, the third topic. So the impact of emerging technology and then particularly blockchain technology on industry, or what people sometimes call smart industry. So blockchain technology promises a lot of things. Radically kind of change the way that we interact with one another. It can track data and store data in a unique way, create trust in data, kind of eliminate the banker, the intermediary. And blockchain promises to secure trust, for example, with regard to transactions. So maybe just to start, trying to understand a bit what blockchain technology is and does. What does trust mean in this case? Does it have the same meaning in a normal context? Is it the same thing that we attribute to a bank that we trust? Chloe, can you explain a bit?
So basically, when you trust a bank, like when you open a bank account, like any kind of random bank, you're basically trusting that the executive management of the bank, combined with the advisory board and all the like supervisory structures of the bank, are doing their job good, and they will maintain your account basically in healthy way and make the good job with it. But if you transfer it to a blockchain framework, then you don't trust anymore into a kind of central entity which is guaranteeing that the system is not corrupted. But on the other side, you're basically trusting a decentralized network where the consensus is made upon a decentralized basis, which means that basically if there are like 10 person or 10 nodes within this network, you're trusting that at least 5 or plus person within the system are agree and consensual on the decision, which means that at the end of the day, the trust is kind of reinforced in the sense that you have more people guaranteeing it. But then there is this like blockchain dilemma. It's kind of a triangle where you can see that basically what you can have with blockchain is from one end some efficiency within the way of doing transactions. Then on the other side you have the security, which means like the security that basically you can trust the system. But the thing is like here, if you basically like build out a super big decentralized network, which will be like super trustable somehow, it will be like inefficient from an efficiency perspective because it will be a lot of work to do it. So this blockchain dilemma at the end of the day forces somehow to think about the right arbitrage, like what is the like optimal size of this decentralized network to make it trustable and at the same time not overloading.
Maybe another question, just to kind of understand a bit what this blockchain technology does. I mean, one of the other advantages that is attributed to blockchain is that it can store data in a very efficient and reliable way. For example, in genealogy, so retrieving who owns a house or property, etc. But maybe a downside could be, of course, this is very handy and practical if you want to retrieve kind of what happened. If you want, but sometimes you want to kind of burn the bridges behind you. Let's say I did really bad stuff. I mean, I cheated on my wife, I killed people, and I want to burn the bridges behind me and go west, like the Americans say. But then blockchain will not allow me to do that because it will even remember that I want to kind of erase this information. So the information cannot be erased. So would that not be a downside?
So it's once again kind of like a consensus questions, because at the end of the day, if the major part of the network decides that we should forget that basically you killed your wife, then there will be something which will happen, which is like calling the blockchain word a fork, where all the people say like, well, from now on we kind of like turn into another chain, and then on this new chain somehow there will be, I mean, you wouldn't have killed your wife on this new chain. So basically it's possible to modify it and go this. But it also means that by doing that, you will also lose some people within this network, because of course, not everyone will be agreed that basically we should erase that you killed your wife. And once again, we go back to this kind of dilemma, because at the end of the day, if you get like a blockchain system where there are only like 10 people deciding on whether you should have, we should erase that you killed your wife or not, then the decision will be somehow easy, and it would be easy to convince 10 people that you shouldn't have killed your wife, and that's, we forget about it. But if you then think about a blockchain such as Bitcoin, which is basically the first example of blockchain we have so far, then it will be like super complicated to convince like the major part of the Bitcoin network that you should like hypothetically not have killed your wife even if you did so.
I have no intention to stop repeating that. So just an example. Okay, maybe going back to this kind of two questions, try to tackle the kind of the advantages of this technology and also be critical. So what would be the biggest problem that this technology would solve for us? Of course, we already kind of briefly mentioned a couple of things, but maybe you have other things in mind. Who can I give the word?
The technology is very good to store data, as you said, but also be a flexible system. On the other hand, save time because of putting the data in a quite easy system and constructive system together.
I am by no way a measure a blockchain expert. Let's go by that. A lot of people think that you're an economist and you're in tech, so you're doing blockchain and Bitcoin. No, not the case. But just reminding that trust is basically the foundation of our societies. And through our history, every time that we manage to increase trust, we're able to do new things. And any technology that we can bring today, and because we went so far on trust, basically people think that the only way to get to complete trust is cutting the human altogether and then trusting the machine. So that's a very interesting concept, both on the blockchain scenario, but also on an AI judge scenario. So how far are we going to go on responsibility in exchange for trust? But I hope that we are going to be able to come to more trustworthy systems for everybody involved. A good example is land registries in Kenya, if I'm not wrong, is a very famous blockchain example of a system that could not be trusted before, and they're trying to put it on the blockchain so that you could protect people, especially small landowners. So I want to see more things like that.
Thank you. Jan?
Just a quick point on that. I think, yeah, I'm also not a blockchain expert, but that's a good point he makes. I would like to hear about the practical use cases for that. Fight against corruption, for example, that is to your point as well, could be a good use case. If you have a blockchain that cannot be changed by a person who is corrupt, that could be a very good use case for the future.
Maybe just taking a question out of the audience and broadening it a bit. So this is not only about blockchain, but smart industry in general. So the question is, who is running ethics in emerging tech companies? The marketeers? Do tech companies need a chief philosophy officer? Would that be kind of a solution to make companies better? What do you think? More jobs for us.
All right, I'll take that one. And I'll try to not make anybody angry with me on this one. Right, so there's probably nobody running ethics in most big companies. Let's start there. There's corporate social responsibility departments that try to seem that they're more ethical. And honestly, if the cost is small, they probably will, until it comes to a point where somebody else from another department is going to say, nah, if we do this, it's going to cut too deep. And there's nobody above them to say, no, this is a cut worth having. And on the chief philosopher part, and I do have good friends in Google and Facebook, so once again, I hope that nobody gets angry with me, especially if they see this video. But it's very, very complicated. You have hundreds and thousands of employees, and then you hire 3 philosophers, put them in a room and say, like, think about what we do. Those guys or ladies, they spend time there, come back with a report, goes to the executive board, closed doors, you don't know what they discussed, and you don't know what they make of it afterwards. And unless people start resigning en masse from those positions, as a matter of fact, Once again, we are an economic system and they're being very well paid. Some might even think that it can make a difference from the inside better than they can from the outside, but still, there's no auditing or legal system that would pressure them to actually follow up with rules and regulations created by an internal group of people. And I'm really sorry if that sounded really dark.
Oh,
So I actually think that the best way to basically force corporations to take their own responsibility are actually external scandals happenings. And these external scandals happening are also due to the fact that today we have distributed access to information, which was not the case 50 years before, where there were some entities controlling and spreading the information. But today this is possible, and I think this is the best hope we can have, like the crowd crowd reflection somehow.
yes,
I think it would be great to have something like this, but seeing the history, I completely agree with you. It's not seems to be realistic. I think it's always the case that we talked in the past all about greenwashing and criticized that, and in the end today, a lot more people think that greenwashing is even good because it goes into the right direction, even if the company doesn't or has not the ethical idea behind the actions are right. So I think this can be a little bit used in general for companies, that if there is anything which guarantees increasing the turnover, guarantees the future of a company, then actions are taken which are good. And if a philosopher officer is something which is good for marketing or for increasing their sales, and then they would hire somebody like that. But I think we saw in the past that rules and punishing something for not following these rules is the best idea to give to companies. If we're talking about CO2 or other topics, all about that.
Yeah, of course, the question is also what kind of ethicists do we need, or philosopher? In the past we had ethicists who were not part of the company. They worked in a quite isolated way, so almost like policemen. So after the decision making was finalized, and they brought an ethicist, and then they asked him, okay, what do you think? Of course, if he said, I don't agree, the response was, I don't understand what you're talking about. If he was positive, then everybody was happy. But maybe a different type of ethicist who also needs to be inside part of the team from the beginning, which would also, of course, require completely different expertise. So you would need an ethicist that also has an expertise in the field that he's working on, and then help and think about developing the stuff, anticipating how people would use it and how it impacts society. That would be completely different kind of ethicist than we had so far. Would that be a solution? Yeah.
I agree with you. That could be a solution. And I wanted to follow up Annabelle as well. Fines are a good motivation for companies to get stuff done. From my practical data protection view, I can talk about privacy by design, for example, and ethics by design is one of the new buzzwords, I guess. So in the GDPR, you have the obligation to think about privacy when you develop a product or when you design a new tool. And if we would have an obligation as well, like ethics by design, for a specific area, this could potentially also be a solution. If we have a more common ground on what ethics should be implemented. But the German government actually implemented an ethics commission that is thinking about some of these questions right now. So maybe there will be a development.
Yeah, indeed. Yes, Nicholas, just to add to that, because if you're talking about fines, you presuppose something has to go wrong already. Whereas if you're talking about ethics by design or value-sensitive design, you want to prevent problems. Go through.
Actually, on my tirade that was very negative, I forgot to say about something positive, which is transparency, basically. So, like you said, a different kind of ethicist also means sometimes a different type of consumer. So if the consumer has more information about what he's buying, from where, And if tastes change, that pressure, that economic pressure makes companies change. And it's not a perfect example, but a nice example is about bio. So basically having food that comes from a specific origin or it follows certain ethical standards, not legal standards. That's very important. So we're not talking about fines, we're talking about a decision. And that comes from a group of consumers basically saying, I'm willing to pay more to get this, or I'm willing to stop buying this because it's not that. So transparency, and then customers making that decision for themselves. Customers are their own ethicists in a sense when they're given the opportunity.
Okay. Yes, very briefly, and then we go to the last.
Yeah, I think this is a very important point, that the power should come from us, from society, and that it's about us, that we not just wait about what the government maybe does and who gives the power to this person or to these people. I think it's really about us, that we raise a voice, and I completely agree with you. There are many actions taken during the last years where just these organizations coming from the ground mentioned that there is a need to change something, or the reason for companies just to change really for the better.
Okay, I hope you're still here. We have talked about different stuff, so the medical field, health, we talk about law, we talk about industry and especially blockchain. So maybe just to go a bit deeper and then reflect on the impact of technology on society, and especially also the question whether, although we are talking, debating, and we seem to assume that we are still able to control technology, but maybe that's already kind of an illusion. Of course, you had, especially after World War I, philosophers and other kind of writers who had quite a pessimistic view on technology. People like Jacques Ellul, who claimed that technology is increasingly becoming autonomous, in the sense that although we think that we are still in control, that actually, I mean, that's just an illusion. Autonomy already has transformed our life to such a degree that we just became kind of little parts in the machine. So is this not a farce here, what we are doing? I mean, we still seem to presuppose that we have a voice, that we can do something, but maybe this is just fiction. So what do you think?
Show's over, kids. Serrano found us out. Bye.
So, because, I mean, just to add one more thing to it, I mean, we seem always to kind of take as a starting point that we humans are autonomous, and then technology is a kind of a tool or an instrument that we use to realize the goal that we have set. But maybe we already should question or challenge the assumption that we are autonomous and that technology is kind of only a tool or an instrument. I mean, of course, you can try to uphold the idea that your iPhone is only an instrument, but if you put the iPhone in your pocket, it already solicited that to use it in one way or another. I mean, it's not that you consciously make the choice to use it. And of course, that's a very, very simple example. But technology are some people, some academics think that they are becoming actors, agents themselves. So maybe the tables have turned now, and we are becoming the tools. And the technology is setting the goals and using us to realize its goals.
But
What do you think?
I would like to ask, have we ever been autonomous?
That's a good question.
I mean, there were always, or have been always factors during last centuries or hundreds of years, which were factors which influenced us. And looking into some cultures, they're even not autonomous because of the rituals, cultures. Being in a culture, you're never really autonomous. But it's a kind of definition, no?
Yeah.
Where does it start? And it's a kind of instrument, it's a kind of system, and we're moving in the system. So following the system in some rules, we are of course not that autonomous anymore. But I think we definitely then just have to start with a definition of where does it start to be or feel autonomous, and where does it end?
Okay, of course, that could be also a starting point, so we were never autonomous, but then still you need to kind of evaluate what kind of implication does that have. Does that mean there's nothing new under the sun, and it's okay? Or does that mean we never were in control, and we shouldn't think that we are in control now? So you can go two ways. Again, remain a bit optimistic, and say, I mean, we have lived a good life so far, and we were never autonomous, and now technology is just another dimension, controlling to a certain extent our behavior. Or you could say, no, we are completely screwed. And there is nothing we can do. Technology has taken over. I mean, which direction, which way, please?
I would say none of them, because I always hear this dichotomy. I really think we develop technology, any kind of technology influences us. I really think it's kind of a symbiosis. And also when people have this, so hail our future robot overlords, it always assumes that we stay exactly like how we are, and then there is AI that we develop. But we're starting right now to put technology into us, like retina chips and all this will evolve. So we're developing technology that's becoming more and more human-like, whereas we put technology inside us. So this will converge. At a certain point, it will converge. It's more like a symbiosis. I don't see really the fight that is happening there.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, of course, people like Marshall McLuhan in the 60s already said, okay, we are creating technology, and technology is then creating us. So there is a kind of a reciprocity and moving back and forth. But some people say that technology's kind of power has become so big that the tables have turned kind of definitely. So it's not that we can regain the power anymore. So artificial intelligence or artificial superintelligence is getting so much power that we just cannot keep up. Yeah.
I think we can keep up. I think there's hope, but we have to stay critical about tools. I think humans have shown over time that they can change decisions, that they can say this tool is not good for us. A lot of people don't think that nuclear weapons are a good idea and try to get rid of them. Not all follow this path anymore, unfortunately, but that's one area where people decide this is not a good idea. We have these tools, but we have to change our way. And of course, the more intelligent AI becomes and more impressive, I tend to trust it more and lose a little bit of my control, but I have to stay critical and I have to think about what I'm doing in my everyday life. I think then there's hope.
Yes, Bloom?
So I think we're still autonomous if we're conscious of the impact of tech on our lives, on basically what we think, what are our relationship, like where do we go. But if we're still kind of conscious of this impact of technology on our lives, then we keep up with our autonomy. Kind of keep up thinking from an autonomous perspective.
Maybe let's make it even a bit more radical. So the starting point seems to be we should remain autonomous. We should remain we should still be in control. I mean, you have also post-humanists, for example, who say, actually, we did quite a bad job so far, humans, and maybe it's good that these technologies are taking over, and let's evolve in something better, and just, it is good that we just get eradicated and get destroyed, because we just make room for smarter entities. And why should humans survive at all?
Huh?
Not as I'm
I think actually it could be like less fun without humans.
That's a good point.
Some humans.
I think that humans have a kind of maker complex, and it's also about being human-centric, right? Like, we can only imagine futures where we are the center of it because we believe that we are the engines of such future. So if we are still on the steering wheel, I cannot imagine a future where humans purposefully say, you know what, I think it's our time, let's go out. So unless something really catastrophic happens AI-wise, there will be humans. What those humans will be might be completely different. I'm with Vince here. Like the idea that we're gonna stay the same makes no sense. Like we could be changing our bodies, we can be changing our societies completely. We might even be changing on a lower level. That's what we saw. What we expect from life. If we went 50 years back and said that you have enough films in your fingertips that you cannot watch them all, people would think that was crazy. And nowadays, if you open Netflix, you say, there's nothing that I want to watch here. Come on, like, don't they send anything new? So humans always push the boundary one level above. Every time we hit 1, they want 2, and then when 2, they want 7, and that's basically how we are. So we're always going to look for something that is unachievable, and then we are going to challenge ourselves to basically get it. That is my point, at least.
Of course, these kind of position also beg the question: what is a human? I mean, you have philosophers and other academics who claim that actually technology is what makes us human, which is a completely different point of view. I mean, we tend to kind of take as a starting point kind of a distinction between technology and human beings. But philosophers like Stigler or Stoltenberg claim actually that what is human about us is that in one way or another are able to create these technologies. And then of course we shouldn't only think about hammers, but a university is also a kind of a technology. It's artificial in a certain sense, and that's what made us develop ourselves. So maybe we shouldn't detach our technology from the human and analyze better what makes a human human, and maybe technology is an important dimension of that. What is your take on this?
I think that the symbiosis of both, as you mentioned already, is really a good match, and the best out of both. And there's not, I think we as a human, we have so much what machines cannot do. And I think getting the best out of both, that should be the best solution in the end. But of course, we can't guarantee that. We can't say that it's going to go for the better. And in the end, if we talk about better, we currently don't know if it's really the better for the whole entity of humans in the end, or if it's just a selfish wish because we want to stay. But in the end, I think, what makes us human is that we have this empathy where it comes to the first part, that we have emotions, that we have the social being, this socializing, that we have this development in us that comes our own spirit, and but also that we are making mistakes, that not everything goes as a 1 or a 0, and there's more than just facts. There is really something like dreams or wishes.
Thank you. Wow.
A human probably did that.
Was that planned?
Okay, the first part of the plan. I would like to open the floor for questions from your side. You can address them to individual panelists, but also to all of them. I know that's difficult to only listen and not kind of intervene, but now the floor is open. So if you have questions, remarks, whatever, then that's good. Is there another mic? I think there's another microphone.
Thank you. I actually wanted to address the very first part of the discussion when it was about medical technologies and emerging tech in the medical field, and there was there was a reference or a repeated reference to basically saying that in the global south and in countries where there's not sufficient medical infrastructure, that these types of technologies would basically provide the opportunity to it would be as you were saying specifically, it would be better to, or you would be replacing doctors that are not existing currently. The question is, doesn't that maybe open up an ethical question of saying, do we, through that, work over ways around the problem and provide a technology and say, maybe, so doctors are good and important, but maybe in those countries they're not as important.
And you want to address the question to one of the panelists, Nicholas?
I just wanted to put it in the
Who
room.
want to respond?
I think you're totally right, but it would be a pragmatic solution. So of course, ideally, you would solve it probably differently. But if you have limited resources and probably will not have a utopia in 10 or 20 years, it's a way to make the lives of people better with limited resources. So I think pragmatically, it's a good idea. Generally, I agree with you. It's probably not the ideal solution.
Just a tiny add to what Vince just said. If at some point other people realize, like let's say that the AI is being used to help the poor, and if at some point the rich also want to use the AI, that is something to say about how doctors are in that society in general. And then we're going to come to the conversation, should we replace them or retrain them or something? But for now, it's a practical solution to a very present problem.
You happy with that response? Yes. At the back?
Hey, now that we're talking about data in the field of medics, let's go focus on Germany. We've got the general data protection that puts health data under a very specific protection. There's like generally a precise ban of using that data except for a narrow field of exceptions, and national states can implement legal laws to broaden those exceptions. Now, our Federal Minister of Health and whatever, Jens Spahn, he once said, data protection is for the healthy. Would you agree with that? Like specifically, Vince Madai, would you say that in Germany, our regulations towards working with health data is sufficient to help the unhealthy? And is the balance between data protection and helping those in need of like medical treatment, would you say that's an equal balance? Don't allow me to change.
I mean, this is a very tough question. Generally, I think on one hand, so if we regarding the potential development of AI solutions, we're absolutely overprotected. On the other hand, we don't really have any means to protect the data if we would open it. So it's kind of like the worst from both worlds. So if we don't change both in the near future, then what will simply happen is that these solutions will develop somewhere else, and then we have to buy them, and hoping that they also fit. So in the end, it would make sense to really think about how can we open more data for this kind of research, but still preserve the autonomy of people to decide, and also have the necessary protection. I know it's super hard, but I think it's really what we need to do.
Yeah.
Just to follow up, that's completely right. That's in the GDPR. These big requirements for very sensitive data, but you can anonymize data, and I think anonymized data could also be useful for your purposes. If you disagree,
the problem is that there is no standard what
for
anonymized data
right.
is. So in the end, institutions like the Charité say as long as we don't know if it's anonymized, we just don't give the data out. So
very careful. Yeah, but
yeah, so generally you're right. If it would be anonymized, but what is anonymized, and then the problem starts.
The problem we're dealing with. But anonymization in general could be a solution, and if you have consent of the data subject, of the patient, you can process the data. So that could also be a solution if the person is very sick, for example, and says, "I will do it. I want to do it, and I freely consent to that." Then it's also fine.
But just to follow up on that, there is also no large framework for that.
That's correct.
And that's a problem. If 10 people say you can use it, great, but I can't train an AI model on that.
True.
There was a question from this side, yes? No?
Hi, I'm Rebecca. I'm an IT product manager. And I was wondering throughout the discussion how, so for me one of the biggest questions is of course how to make decisions in algorithms, because it's not like I don't know how who makes the decisions on algorithms. The fact of the matter is, for the features that I ask to be developed, I make the decision, and it is my responsibility how these are implemented. I have to review that. That is one of the major parts of my jobs. Especially because I write basically internal software, meaning it is software for the workplace, where one of the big ethical questions I face on a regular basis is the tracking of work performance of workers. And there, for me, the biggest problem I usually have is that we implement something, and because we all work for capitalistic companies that want to make money, we never really get the chance to review algorithms. And we never really get the chance to kind of look back, okay, did this work in the way we intended? So how do you think can we create a culture where this becomes more common for companies to also understand that we don't have to just dole out new features, but actually also review their effects? Because as product managers, this is what everybody would love to do, but essentially I know of no product manager who actually gets the time to do the review on the technology they create.
Yes, and of course Amazon was one of those companies that also came quite badly kind of in the news, tracking the performance of people almost on a millimeter level. So what would be your response to this? Maybe Jan?
That sounds boring. Yeah, but if we program software to carry out certain tasks, we should review it. Yeah, of course.
I think the only solution is regulation, and this is what will happen. Right now, you have kind of this Wild West mentality, but I'm convinced that in a few years, AI will be as heavily regulated as, for example, a medical device or a pharmaceutic that is developed. And in these areas, you actually have to show all these things. You have to do them, otherwise you're not getting licensed. So that's the only way how you can force a company to actually do a review. And actually all the big agencies, the FDA, but also European Union, they picked up on this, and they are now developing the guidelines for AI regulation and things like what was your model trained on, is there bias in the data, all this is addressed in these frameworks.
Yeah, I guess the question is also how to do that and where to start. Yes.
So something that I could think about is like inspiring myself from all the like blockchain, basically like blockchain code and blockchain ecosystem works, is that we could basically maybe force this corporation to get a peer review on the software, the inside of the software. But when I mean peer review, it's not just about like two people reading it, but more like forces like a batch of people getting through it and taking their responsibility on it.
Question from this gentleman.
So Germany is probably the most careful country in the world in the sense of moving forward with AI. And then we've got a country like China, which is just absolutely Wild West in terms of the government level, company level, just letting loose on whatever they want to do with AI and technology. What do you think will happen in like the next couple of years, seeing that, because there's this big tech race, it's like we have to keep up with China, we have to keep up with China. But I think that we don't actually have to keep up with China. I think what we're doing here is a good sign that we don't have to keep up with China.
Yeah. So that's a discussion that comes very often, that Europe feels that they're playing third wheel to the whole AI romance going between America and China. And the Europeans have this very depressive outlook of like, we're never going to catch up. If we think it nationally, yes. So Germany would never be as strong, not even close, to China and the US. But we can have some hopes for continent-wide plans and strategies. We do see some Franco-German cooperation in that sense. And from the European Union as well, at least what they try to show is that they're looking to create like their own European brand of AI, which might not be the utmost efficiency, but they would follow European values. And it's a market big on economic levels, right? So technology sometimes completely break economics, but on economic terms, it could be that there is space for a European brand of AI that serves not only European countries, but other countries that see that values can defeat, let's say, a marginal improvement in efficiency.
I'm a member and ambassador of Miss AI, and we are currently exactly doing this, what you described or what you also said. It's important that we have a European Union solution and not just going or trying with Germany, where we have so many so many things, so many steps just to move forward and to reach a level. But as a European Union, we can be strong, not as strong as China. And this is not just because we can't reach it, it's because our diversity, and this diversity is a quality, not even a lack. And but on the other hand, I think we can model something where we come together and define one solution, and this is, I think, something we should aim. And therefore, I think this commission currently putting something together on rules about IE and the European Union, but also this meetings between France and Germany. This is a start, and I hope that will speed up, because it needs that. Even if we are talking about diversity, it needs that in comparison to the other countries moving up there.
But maybe the question is not only should we do it, but can we do it? I mean, Naughter said, and this is not my words, Europe has become kind of a nagging old widow. So can we do it? And how? How should we kind of do it?
I know that Alibaba said that, no? Many others said that the European Union never reaches this. But I think now is a time where we can reach a special level. I think we shouldn't try to compare with China and shouldn't try to reach a level of China. But I think we can be a player in the world which is known as somebody which is respected. And I think now is the time to start with that.
There was a question on this side, I can't remember it.
Thank you. So my name is Abdel. I really like the discussion. I liked how we started with seeing how technologies would impact medicine, some global challenges. Then we moved to how technology would impact some aspects of the human life, like the freedom and maybe overcoming biases. But I just want to come back to the title, actually, Ethics in Emerging Tech. But how do you think technologies would challenge the notion of ethics themselves? And I can maybe give a speculative image. Do you think that it's possible that technologies would create an artificial philosopher that would finally give us the purpose in life?
Maybe just to expand on the question, of course, I mean, we are interested in ethics and we are interested in creating or designing good technology, but the question is always, what do we mean by that? I mean, what is good technology? Is technology good if it makes us happier? Is it good if it makes us more rational? Is it good if it kind of increases well-being in general? So what exactly is that? I mean, that's already kind of requires a lot of reflection. Maybe giving you the word then.
I think this is a good point. I think we should find the level of from where we define that. Maybe that's also better because IE can maybe help support us and behave more resources friendly, as we don't do until now, and can help us making the world a better place, a greener place, even if it's taking over the rules for us. So I think this is a really philosophical question.
Yeah, again, I mean, I think that the question is not, couldn't we make a kind of an ethical machine or an ethical artificial intelligence? I mean, there is already there are a lot of values also kind of inscripted in technology, but the question is, what kind of values? I mean, where do we go for? And this is just opening Pandora's box again. So, do we go for the utilitarians who says, okay, it's happiness that is the most important value, so let's increase happiness for the greatest number. But then, of course, the question is then, what is happiness? Is it pleasure? And if we can do that by popping pills, is that the solution, or should we broaden the notion of happiness and including also other values besides pleasure to it? So it is not only kind of a practical problem, but it also requires it's also a conceptual issue. It requires understanding what we mean by good technology. What exactly do we mean by good if we say good technology? Yeah.
But I think you touched upon the important point. What do we mean? Your question also implied this, but I also hear like people think, oh, find an ethicist is here, like Gian or also me now. What is right? I'm like, I don't know. That's not our job. Our job is to help basically people understand if so. Let's say you come up with a theory, an ethical theory, and we're trained to point out, wait, there's a flaw inside this. Other people have thought, think about this like this. We don't have the answers, and the machine will also not have the answer. In the end, ethics emerges from the society, from all of us, and AI will reflect our ethics. So this is what. So there will be no AI machine telling us this is the final ethics.
Yeah, Nicholas, and then I'll go to. I know that you're waiting for a long time.
Very
briefly.
On good technology, that's a question that comes very often to me because I work in a place called Good Technology Collective. So it's basically like the second question people ask after what's your name, how's the weather, what is good technology? And we always answer like we have no idea what good technology is, and that really surprises people. But in my experience, what we realize right now is that no one has the same idea of what good technology is. And to a point, it's a bit presumptuous to imagine that we can create an idea of what is good technology right now, that everybody in the world would just say, yeah, that's right. And during like traveling, I did a workshop, for example, in Norway, where their idea of good technology for me was crazy because it depended way too much on believing that everybody would do the right thing and that the UN would save us all. And when I talk about good technology in Brazil, it's about solving real practical problems, doesn't matter the cost. So the most important thing about good technology is sitting ourselves in our tribes or in our communities and asking the question, what is good technology for me? Which is the technology that I would be willing to spend hours, money, time to develop and to support. And that discussion itself will bring better technology into place. Not perfect, but maybe just good.
Yes, go ahead.
So my name is Tim. My basic question will be what happens to ethics in decentralized systems, and I'll just unpack the question a bit to make you understand what I mean by it. So I think when we talk about ethics, sometimes, or usually we have this implicit idea that there's one ethically right solution to a problem. So for example, we have a rule that discrimination is bad, and then in our legal system, as soon as the court determines, okay, this practice is discriminatory, then we abolish this practice and say, okay, this is now ethically bad, this practice has been shown to be discriminatory. Now what you said in the discussion as well at some point was everybody can become his own ethicist, and that's also a model that some companies are moving to. So for example, Facebook is also moving towards a model that gives users control to set their own rules as to what they want to see and what not. So what happens to ethics in this respect if everybody decides his or her own ethical rules? Do we still have this idea of one ethically right choice, or will it also become a decentralized ethics? I'm wondering what you think about it.
Okay, again, a very universal question, of course. I mean, do we have a universal ethics, or is ethics already something that you could have very different approaches to? Yes, Chloe?
I don't know. I think that basically, as like everyone can become its self-ethicists, and in that sense, there are like no universal answer of like what ethic is. But so if we consider like a decentralized system, then ethics rely on the matter of consensus once again, and it wouldn't be the ethic in a sense of like one person, but like the ethic of like the consensus, like the major part of this person within the system. Then it also depends like which kind of person you have in this system and how big is your system. Which means that basically, like, for example, when JP Morgan is issuing its own coin, JP Morgan coin, which is basically kind of like a decentralized currency, but still permissioned, which means that not everyone has access to it, and the size of the decentralized network is still limited, then at the end of the day, the ethics still rely on a bunch of people that are working for JP Morgan. But then if you take it like broader, much bigger picture, then maybe you can reach out to more like consensual definition of what is ethics. Because if I'm part of a system and I'm striving for this system to succeed, and I'm not agree with the ethics of the system itself, I will just like leave out the system and that's it. and so basically decentralized system can incentivize people to converge toward the same direction and the same values and principles. Hypothetically.
Maybe just to kind of keep up with, the topics are related to emerging technology. Now we seem to take as a starting point, okay, there is nothing new under the sun, so we already had all these ethical issues, and technology is not really kind of generating new ethical questions. I don't think actually that's right. Just to give you one very small example, take ultrasound. So if your wife or yourself or your girlfriend or whatever is pregnant, now we have ultrasound, so that can detect, for example, whether the child has an illness or will create an illness. And we have that technology forces almost us to make a decision. Before the technology, we didn't have that choice. Now, because of the technology, because of the ultrasound, and of course it's based on all kinds of assumptions and statistics, but confronted with the possibility that your child might be ill, now you have to make a choice. Shall I keep it or not? Before, you had to wait 9 months and hopefully something good will come out of it. But now, also because of the technology, you are also introducing new issues, new problems. So I would like to kind of almost emphasize that we need to relate the technology also to the ethical debate. There were a lot of questions, but I just wanted to highlight the topic of today. Yes, you were waiting for a long time, and then.
I just wanted to ask, when we talk about emerging tech, technology is expensive, so who decides which technology emerges as well is, I think, also an important question, because technology doesn't happen without money. And even though it's really beautiful to say the society decides that this technology gets better, but I think actually money decides which technology gets better. And I would like to know, because I'm not in the industry, and I would like to know what's your experience from the inside, how technology emerges. And because when we talk about ethics, we say the society affects the ethics, but at its core, I think I have the feeling that actually, again, the market decides the ethics. So I would like to have your opinion on that, and how do you experience this, how the market shapes your research topics, or how the market shapes your thoughts in your daily life?
Actually, 2 questions. So the market and industry, entrepreneurs, the big companies decide what kind of technology is created, and also they decide how to kind of tackle ethical issues. Is that what you mean? Okay. Go ahead.
May I start? Because that's a very complicated question. I think everybody here is going to have very different answers. On a very basic level, first class you have in economics when you get to university, that is the demand that creates the supply and not the other way around. So basically, companies will provide whatever the people want, and if companies try to provide something that people won't want, it will fail, and then we'll do that. But that is economics 101, let's say, and people who study economics for 30, 40 years, so it has to be more to that answer. And my feeling technology, my experience is, it is a mix. Technology is something that develops really fast, and that means that companies many times have to make decisions up in the future that they don't actually have enough data to say if it's right or wrong. And there's a bit of like a national society mythos of what we'll be aiming for. So so self-driving cars is one of those. Like a lot of people there are developing this, and I'm pretty sure that most of those companies won't be big players, but there's a feeling in many industries that that is where we should be spending our money in. So there is this part. And then there's a part about which is the kind of change or product that we as a country, as a society, are asking of the companies. And there is half money, half preferences. What makes me more money, and what allows me to sell to the broadest amount of people possible. But that's a very economic point of view.
Okay, also to make sure that we have kind of a bit of time for informal interaction, I will go to the last question.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry, Vincent.
It's actually more a contribution. I'm Adina. I'm actually a blockchain person. And I think what the question that needs to be raised maybe, and also something that I've heard on this panel, is how can Europe, with its position of being more aware of ethics, but also of data privacy, etc., how can we actually ask the other question, which is who owns the technology? So the question is never so much about technology is never good or bad, right? With a knife I can kill somebody or I can cut a bread. The question of ethics lies always in the ownership and the control of the technology. So the beauty about blockchain is that if you open up, like let's say you have an application, you go to an undeveloped country, there's a big medical problem. You have like 1 million people spitting into a tube, submitting their medical data. Who owns that data? Right, so the question is now, if we open it up to consensus-driven protocols, then we basically need one thing, which is governance. And governance is the biggest problem that we have on blockchain right now. And that is something where there needs to be a collaboration between people who know governance and people who know blockchain. And this is the intersection that we really lack in opening up those technologies and the ownership to the public.
Chloe, you want to respond?
Yeah, basically I totally agree with what you were saying, and what I can say is, I mean, like for now the governance is mostly based on the game theory and incentivize of the people that are basically staking within the blockchain, but also it's kind of like getting super fast in terms of like new framework for governance are issued. So I'm pretty optimistic from this perspective, and hopefully like governance will be way better in anytime soon. And also like from a technical perspective, what we can see out is like these new mechanisms such as like zero knowledge proof that would enable at some point to basically keep on with the privacy of data and at the same time using it for an unbiased algorithm making, hopefully.
One of you want to respond? Let me just respond to the gun example. I mean, I partly agree with you, or the knife. I mean, of course, you can use a knife to cut bread or to kill somebody, but if you have a knife in your home or a gun in your home, chances are that you will use it quicker than if you don't have a knife. So having the thing in your pocket or in your house or in your car already influences your behavior. So
But we have to talk about power and who owns the gun and who owns the knife.
Okay, I have to. Let's stop. I have to close. Just to see whether there are things that I don't forget to say. Yeah. So of course, before I thank you, Delphi, so the journal, consider to submit articles, opinions, etc., reviews, and we just started it, and we're very excited about it, and we think actually that it can fulfill an important role also in this debate, in this discussion. So I hope we can continue this conversation also in the journal. Then I would like to thank the panelists, of course, Annabelle, Nicholas, Vince, Chloe, and Jan for all the insightful responses and comments, and also Clara and Jacob and Anna for organizing everything. I mean, you did, of course, most of the job. And of course, you for your attention, for being here. Thank you again for this night. Before I close and we go to the kind of informal part of the evening, also Wolfgang wants to say a couple of words.
Yes, 2 words from my side. So many thanks to you, Giano, and the panelists for this great discussion. So we really had a great impression what Delphi can all address to. And so this is just what Giano said already. We want your impact, your voice, your interests in this journal. So please contact us, stay with us. We're thinking about maybe building a blog, but till we are there, it would be great if you could put your address on the list here so that we can really interact with you, because that's actually what will happen. This is not a typical academic journal where professors say what's going to be into the content. You have to give us the content on that side. So that would be really very great if you could do that. Yes, and having had this, I wish us all a little drink. I hope some drinks are still left, and hope to see you soon again, because that's actually what I wanted to say too. to Steffi that she really did a great job here in the background, and that we would maybe continue this format. I think it's a great format, and hope to see you soon again. Thanks.